All right, so here we are learning Hilchos Shabbos. We were learning yesterday about Davar Gush. Towards the end of the shir yesterday, we were talking about a solid piece. And we mentioned that some say that a solid does not have the din of a kli sheni or a kli shlishi or what have you, because it's not actually contained by the walls that surround it, so it maintains the din of a kli rishon. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about that today. No. Davar Gush. Yeah. We got onto it. Galashnu ktsat. We mentioned that there are achronim that hold that our Davar Gush has a din of a kli rishon, and that in Hilchos Basa b'Chalav, the Shach and the Taz paskin like those Rishonim, right? Because the din of a kli rishon and kli sheni is nageya, meaning to say it affects areas of halacha. I don't want to say way beyond Hilchos Shabbos, but in many other areas besides Hilchos Shabbos, Basa b'Chalav, for example. So if something mixes in a way that the flavors are exchanged, obviously it's a problem of Basa b'Chalav. If not, you can just wash it off and that's it. We mentioned yesterday about Hilchos Brachos in terms of cooking and so on. It also affects, by the way, a totally different area of halacha, which we're not even aware of today. That is meiser. There's certain halachas of certain foods that are patur and meiser until you cook them. You cook them, they become like a sudas keva, like a permanent meal, and you can't eat it without taking meiser. So then,
what kind of food?
Potatoes,
foods that can't be eaten.
No, I think it's actually any food that you didn't prepare in the regular way. Usually there's a way to prepare something in a way that becomes chayav and meiser. If you bring it into the front door or you in the granary, if you complete it. If you didn't do something that is mechayav and meiser, or you didn't do it yet you cook it, that makes it chayav and meiser, just because it becomes a kviyas, it becomes a permanent way of eating it. So in Hilchos Meiser and in Mishnayos about it, it discusses, what is considered cooking. So in that area of halacha also is important to know kli rishon, kli sheni, all these things. Anyway, I did see that some achronim say that even though in Hilchos Basa b'Chalav, the Shach and the Taz are strict, and they say that a Davar Gush, a solid piece, is going to have the status of a kli rishon even after you take it out of the kli rishon and you put it in a kli sheni. You take a piece of chicken out of the pan where you cooked it in, or the grill, whatever it is, you put it on a plate. In Hilchos Basa b'Chalav, the Shach and Taz both paskin that is a kli rishon because it's not cooled by the walls. Nevertheless, the achronim say that doesn't mean that in Hilchos Shabbos they would say the same thing. Because in the dinim, thank you very much, the dinim of kli rishon, the dinim of bishul on Shabbos are different than when it comes to Basa b'Chalav. Why? By Basa b'Chalav, the very fact that the flavors exchange presents a problem. If milk has the flavor of meat or vice versa, it's a problem. Whereas in Hilchos Shabbos, it's only a problem if it's actually cooked. That's why we said yesterday that even the shittas that say that a kli sheni is maflit and mavliya in terms of Basa b'Chalav, which is the Rashal holds that, the Rashba holds that. Nevertheless, in Hilchos Shabbos, we know a kli sheni does not cook. Even though some things it does, but some things it definitely does not. And that's because even if in those halachas we say it's maflet and mavliya, it exchanges flavors, that doesn't mean it actually cooks. So that's first of all. Second of all, I came across a vort by Reb Shlomo Zalman, who says, let's say you have a piece of kugel. In Yerushalayim, they have what's called Yerushalmi kugel. A noodly one, which they leave on the plata overnight, sitting in oil, so it gets like really oily and totally brown, and the bottom of it gets like really hard. And that's a thing, it's a Yerushalmi thing. Anyway, if you have a piece of Yerushalmi kugel, it's traditionally served with a pickle. Don't ask why, that's just the Yerushalayim tradition. And Shlomo Zalman says, don't worry about the pickle and the kugel on the same plate. It's a gush, it's a piece, and some say that a davar gush is a kli rishon. So you have this kli rishon sitting on your plate with an uncooked pickle. What's going on? I'm sorry?
Pickle's cooked.
Pickle's cooked? Since when is a pickle cooked?
And not pickling is cooking.
No. Pickling is cooking. Midrabanan. Not midaraisa. Somebody else midrabanan took a pickle on Shabbos. It's not us midaraisa. Person pickles on Shabbos, he's not chayav skila. It's a midrabanan. Now that, because it's only midrabanan, that means it's not actual cooking. When we say in bishul achar bishul, that rule would not apply to pickling. Yesh bishul achar kvisha, or melicha, or anything like that. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Because it's not actual cooking, midaraisa. So it's not cooking for basa b'chalav also, for your information. Right? Basa b'chalav is only derech bishul asatayr, the normal way of cooking. Even though the flavors are exchanged with kvisha and melicha. But that's not the definition of bishul, neither for Shabbos nor for basa b'chalav.
Yes. Pickling and salting isn't allowed on Shabbos, is it?
Drabanan.
But this is why we put the lemon juice or salt on immediately, not way before. Is that right?
Exactly, correct.
השאלה פה נשאלת על הפיקול בתוך האוכל חם, באותו צלחת.
באותו צלחת, כן.
אז אולי הוא יתבשל קצת, אומרים?
כן, זו השאלה.
אבל לא רוצה אותו מבושל.
So, Reb Shlomo Zalman has a few reasons to be makel here. And here's what they are. Ready? So, first of all, it's lo nichale. You have no interest in cooking this pickle.
Yeah.
Second of all, the whole concept of a gush cooking, of a solid piece having the din of a kli rishon is a machlokas. Not everybody agrees. Third of all, it's loy miskaven. It's not your intent. Maybe it will happen, maybe it won't happen. It's not for sure. And second, and finally, it's a kilkel. Nobody likes eating cooked pickles. I mean, nobody that I know. Hot, but not cooked.
Not even hot pickles.
Yeah, like also, exactly. I mean, hot like charis, but not hot like hot. Yes, so basically he's makel. Now, Moshe Feinstein writes a different kula. He writes that even if we are strict to consider a davar gush a kli rishon, nevertheless, this is something I mentioned yesterday as a possibility, but not I wasn't sure about it. But Moshe mentions it. And Moshe mentions maybe we can be makel in a case where the davar lach was already cooked, like ketchup, where the ketchup was already cooked in the factory. Now it's cooled off, but some say that ein bishul achar bishul. So he says we don't have to be machmer two chumras.
A lot of canned foods are processed foods.
Certainly, yes. Yeah. True.
So when a can of vegetables, for example, an issue, then that would be cool.
Well, you wouldn't want to heat it up in a way that's actual cooking because we paskin yesh b'shalach habishal balach. But here, because he's saying that davar gush is not really a kli rishon, it's only a chumrah to consider a kli rishon, so we don't have to be machmer two chumras at the same time.
So why can't we learn from this a kal v'chomer that if we're not considering a what could be a kli rishon as a kli rishon, then certainly a kli sheni, we wouldn't worry about any of these things for the same reasons.
What do you mean?
So let's say soup in a kli sheni.
You want to apply this kula to soup in a kli sheni? Absolutely. You can put a liquid in a sheni that was already cooked. That's what you want. You're looking for the same
Liquid, solid, anything.
That was cooked already.
I want to put my pickle into soup. If I can put my pickle on top of the pickle.
Reb Moshe does not give the heter for a pickle. Reb Moshe gives the heter for ketchup because it was already cooked.
No, the first one.
Reb Shlomo Zalman gives it for pickle because you don't want to heat it, and maybe it won't actually get hot. But if you're putting it in soup, you clearly do want to heat it.
No, that's okay. So take croutons. I have no intention. I just want the crunch.
No, you definitely want to heat it. What does that mean? You're putting in soup. You know it's going to get hot. He's talking about put it on the plate, and the pickle maybe it won't touch it, maybe it won't touch it. Yeah,
Okay.
It's different. Sorry, what were you saying?
The Rebbe said, so the second kula, the second chumrah was, what was the second?
Moshe actually interestingly holds that bishalach bishal balach is a chumrah. He holds the ikar halacha as bishal ein bishalach bishal balach, and it's a chumrah that we have not to reheat it, and so that's one chumrah. And another chumrah is davar gush to be considered a kli rishon.
Maybe he means that it's a machlokas of poskim. We're machmer, but that's the halacha. He holds us ikar and mutter.
Well,
Like if he needed to do it.
no, not if you needed to do it, but saying the Ramah is mekel as long as it's somewhat hot. Lo nitztana legamri. So his argument is if it's actually aser maker adin, so if it's not yes let it anymore, it's gone. Well, what do you mean lo nitztana legamri? Why should that make a difference? So based on that, he says.
Meaning the fact that it went from yatzoletas to lo nitzan legamre, and then you're putting it back on the plot to make it yatzoletas. So he's proving from there that it must be the maker.
The maker din is water, exactly. The whole thing about
Does
it
anyone
should.
say it like that?
Yeah, that's one of the ways of understanding the Ramah. The Ramah says that. The question is, what is the Ramah? What's the basis of the Ramah? So some say the Ramah's basis is that really he holds that it's mutter completely, but just to make sure you don't heat up something that was never cooked before. This is his way of reminding you that it should still be a little bit warm. So that's how he's going. So and then the gush itself is he holds maker din is really not doesn't cook if it's not in the kli rishon.
Gush is something that stays together. What has
A solid piece that doesn't spread onto the walls. It's not contained by the walls, basically.
chicken, cocoa.
Yeah, kugel, chicken, even rice, anything that holds itself doesn't spread out.
What something that wouldn't the soup.
A soup, yeah, exactly. Anything liquid, or even a salad that's within a liquid. We said yesterday, a soup that has pieces, matzo balls or vegetables, because it's all contained in the soup, which is contained in the bowl. That's all. That's not a davar gush. That's all considered like a cliche. Now, that being said, Rabbi Forkash does point out that we don't always use this concept of, we don't do two chumras together. We see sometimes in Hilchos Shabbos where we do. So it's hard to give this as a rule. The example he brings is, Alter Rebbe says in the Siddur, not to put even our salt in a kli sheni. Again, our salt was already cooked once. So, sorry? The sea salt. Our sea salt was cooked. Alter Rebbe was talking about salt that was cooked. Nowadays, I don't know if the mineral salt is cooked. But the sea salt, let's say, is. But he is talking about salt that was cooked. Now, something that's dry and cooked, there's no risk to reheat. However, we mentioned that even though most Rishonim hold that if it's dry now, it's considered dry. But the Mordechai says, no, if it's going to become liquid right away, it's considered liquid already. So that's like a chumrah. To be machmir like the Mordechai, that something that is going to become liquid should be considered a liquid. And the whole thing of salt cooking in a kli sheni, that itself is a chumrah, right? If you remember, because there were two ways of understanding in the Gemara. And Tosfos says the main halacha is that it's mutter, but mutter even in a kli rishon, because salt is very difficult to cook, like ox meat. A person machmir and doesn't put it in a kli sheni, tavel bracha, gets a bracha. So why should we be machmir in our salt when you have two reasons to be mekel? Nevertheless, Alter Rebbe is machmir. So it's an interesting thing that this is not a rule that always applies. So I'm just saying, when Moshe says it, Moshe held it, and it's something to bear in mind, but not an across-the-board thing.
Salt is usually cooked in that it's heated to remove the moisture. So the moisture is evaporated out through heat.
With mineral salt or sea salt?
I'm actually just looking up the most common brand of regular salt. Sea salt, it happens to be.
All right, sea salt I heard was cooked. I don't know about mineral salt. I simply don't know. Okay, a few more points that I wanted to cover. We discussed yesterday about the yad nichvis boy, the fact that a ambati, which is like a bath, is very hot, and the Torah therefore holds that Chayim, by the way, is actually written on Mishnah and Maasros, where it talks about cooking the whatever it is you put it in a kli sheni, it's very hot. That's where he brings it up. But anyway, just to point out that this chumrah of yad nichvetz boy, that a kli sheni that's very hot has the status of a kli rishon, does not apply to a kli shlishi. That means once you pour it from the kettle to the cup, then to the second cup is a kli shlishi, and we do not have that chumrah any longer, because the whole basis of it is the ambati. That's the whole basis of it, and it says clearly about an ambati that if you pour it into a kli, into the next keli, it's okay. Right? If you look in the very halacha that we learned.
Yes,
Let's read it again. Ambati shel merchatz, a bath, filled with hot water. Av bichu kli sheni, the Rama says, even though it's a kli sheni, you can't put cold water into because it heats it a lot. You can pour from this hot water into another ambati of Sinai. Actually, here it doesn't talk about a kli sheni, but a kli shlishi, excuse me. I'm pretty sure it's in the Torah, though.
Because you take it with a scoop, and then you pour it to the other ambati.
No scoops.
Any? How do you pour from ambati to other ambati? You have to have a kli. So the kli is a kli sheni,
And the other one, it's Kli Shlishi.
Scoops are complicated. We'll discuss it now soon. Here he doesn't mention the scoop. We'll discuss it.
We did mention that there's a lot of scope to consider a soup bowl a Kli Shlishi because of the ladle. Is that right?
Yeah,
Because of the Midrabanan and various other things.
Yes, we will discuss more about the ladles soon. I just want to find where I think the Torah says that from an ampati it becomes a Kli Shlishi. Let me just check that up. Mecham shel Nachayshas. Here it is. Okay, it's not in the Torah either, but I'm pretty sure I have it in my head that those that discussed Ambati say clearly that once it's into the cliche, maybe it's in the Beis Yosef on this tour, that once it's in the Kli Shlishi, even water from an Ambati, which was very hot, once it's in the next Keli, it's no different than any other Kli. So that's why there's no room to be machmer. Let's just talk about this, Lamaisa. You have very hot water from a Kli Rishon. You just poured it straight out of the urn. It's mamish boiling hot. So if you consider it a Kli Rishon, you won't add cold water to it, right? Even tea essence, because yesh bishul acha bishul belach. So therefore, you will want to pour it into another keli, and then add the essence, or pour it onto the essence that's in a third keli. Either one makes no difference.
I think if you pour this one to another kli, and then you take the other one cold on top of the hot, this is issue, right?
No. Once it's in the next one, it's a Kli Shlishi, and it doesn't cook. Even though it's very hot, but what's the Kli Shlishi, it doesn't have the protocol. Everybody agrees.
What's the problem with the cliche?
According to the Tur and the Chai Adam, and actually the Tzemach Tzedek brings it also, a very hot Kli Sheni is like a Kli Rishon. Everything we've been learning about a Kli Sheni not cooking is only Yad Soledes Boy. Yad Soledes Boy means you can't keep it in there for too long. But Yad Nichvis Boy, if your hand mamish burns from touching it, then it's like a Kli Sheni. It's like a Kli Rishon, even though it's a Kli Sheni.
Would it burn a finger? Burns don't usually have boiling water, do they?
Well, every so often they're on a cycle, so they get somewhat warmer, somewhat cooler, and then they reboil
Burns are like that?
Yeah, I mean,
Just the cycle.
There's a cycle.
It just has a.
It keeps it on the whole time, like on low. I don't think so. I think it's a cycle.
So, are we saying that a Kli Sheni can operate as a Kli Rishon, but if it goes into a Kli Shlishi, it is always a Kli Shlishi?
Yeah.
And that we learn this from the Ambati, which is a very hot bath.
Yes.
And what makes an Ambati different? I didn't quite understand why it's different.
Well, in those days, they used to heat up the ambati to a very hot temperature, or the water used in a very hot temperature. That's all. It's just temperature.
Is this because if you have a massive volume of water, if I pour straight out of an urn into a very big vat, it will actually be almost the same temperature. Whereas if I do it into a small cup, it will lose the temperature very quickly, and the sides will cool it down.
I mean, it is true that the bigger the larger the amount of water, the better it will be. It will retain its heat, but the poskim do not put that condition in. Meaning to say, they understand that ambati is simply an example of something very hot. So even though you're right, that's an additional reason for it to be very hot. Even so, something that's not as big as that, but is still very hot, would have this chumr.
Okay, so what we learn, regardless of what an ambati actually is and how it operates, is that scalding is kli rishon, yad soledes boy is not kli rishon, and it's either kli sheni or shlishi.
Yeah. Again, this is according to some opinions. I'm not saying everybody agrees with this, but this is the basis for that opinion, correct?
And it's one that we hold by, is it?
That Tzemach Tzedek does hold of it, yes.
Because I've always made everything in a kli shlishi in terms of
Right.
clean
Thanks, Karen. I just want to find the because you were asking about if it actually burns. I want to find the here he brings from Rav Rosner. If you can leave your fingers in it for a few seconds, that's not called nichvus.
Yeah.
So his definition is that you can't leave it in there at all. It's too hot to leave in even for a second.
For
Nichvus, yeah. Doesn't have to actually burn, but it has to be that hot that you can't leave it for a second.
You wouldn't know in normal would leave the hand for a second.
Yeah.
Not a whole second. Maybe a dip.
Yeah.
That's not the water.
So, yeah. Okay. Now, coming back to the Machaber on the din of Ambati, if you remember, the Machaber did not mention that the Ambati was a Kli Sheni. That was the Ramaz addition. And therefore, it seems that the Machaber is talking about an Ambati which is a Kli Rishon. Now, the question is, of course, you can't put water into a Kli Rishon. I mean, that's obvious. Why talk about an Ambati? So, it would seem that the Machaber is following the Rishonim that say as follows. Normally, you're allowed to add a large volume of cold water into a Kli Rishon if you're gonna pour it all at once and it's gonna cool down and end up only being warm. I repeat, you have a
less than 45 degrees.
Sorry?
Less than 45 degrees?
Exactly. You have a Kli Rishon which has less water than this. And you're going to pour in a lot of cold water, and it's going to end up not being Yatzalet's boy. So you're allowed, as long as you pour it in at once. Ambati, however, the Rishonim say, because it's so hot, we don't want you to do that. This might also be a volume thing, by the way. It's so big, how are you going to pour in so much all at once? It's asking for trouble. So you cannot add cold water to it at all, even if it's in a large amount. And this has some practical application in terms of a mikveh. If you have a mikveh on Shabbos morning, it's too hot. It's a problem to add cold water, even a large amount. I'm saying if it's Yatzalet, because even though in other areas we say if you add it at once and the total result is going to be less than Yatzalet, it's okay. Specifically, by Ambati, it's a problem. If it's a Kli Rishon, actually, if it's a Kli Rishon. What? Some have an actual radiator in the mikveh.
You have an immersion element in it.
Exactly.
Immersion heater.
Yeah.
The Ambati, it's a fire under the Ambati.
That would make it a Kli Rishon.
Yes, but in the mikveh, it's not a fire under the ground.
Some mikvahs have an actual heating element inside. They have the metal, you know what I mean? The metal.
It's
Yeah.
electric.
It's not electric. It's hot water going through the metal. You know what I'm saying?
Radiator.
It's like a radiator, exactly. Okay. Yeah, I've seen it in a lot of places. Okay, my friends. Ladle. I said we would discuss the ladle a little bit. Matzeket. Yeah? This is all Torah Shabbat Peh. You'll forgive me. It's not, I'm not reading it inside because this is not explicitly discussed. The Taz discusses it, but it's not in the actual pnim of the Machaber or the Alter Rebbe for that matter. So, we mentioned this in the past. A Kli Rishon is what was on the fire. A kli sheni is what you pour the stuff from the kli rishon into. What is the status of a ladle which you put into the kli rishon and take the stuff out of the kli rishon with? So that is a subject of dispute. The Taz in Yeridea has a long piece on this. And one of his points is that, if you remember, we discussed this in the past, that Rebbe was once bathing in Chametz area, and Rav Yitzchak Rav Dimi, who was attending to him, wanted to heat up the oil, and Rebbe said, "Toil b'kli sheni v'tein." Take the water in a kli sheni and put the oil in it. Like stick the flask of oil in the kli sheni, and that way you'll heat it up. So the Taz discusses, what does it mean when he said toil b'kli sheni v'tein? Did he mean take the water from the chametz area with some kind of keli, just like a ladle, dip it in, and that's the kli sheni, and then you can put it in? That would be a proof that a ladle is like a kli sheni. He says, no, it doesn't mean that. Because then why would he say it's tol b'kli sheni? He should have said tol b'kli v'tein. The fact that he specifically says tol b'kli sheni v'tein, he means, no, this is not the kli sheni, because you're putting it in to the bath. This is the kli rishon. Take that, put it into a kli sheni, and then take.
Take with kli sheni. If you specify sheni, that means that becomes the kli sheni.
No, he's saying toil, take it, b'kli sheni, in a kli sheni, v'tein. It's like a comma. This is how he's understanding.
Kli sheni titen.
Toil. I mean, the truth is, you could learn the exact opposite pshat. You could learn the exact opposite pshat. Toil b'kli sheni. Do one action, take it, and right away v'tein. Right?
You're tolling with the kli sheni. Toll with kli
Right,
sheni.
right. But he's saying shouldn't say the word sheni. Why is he adding an extra word?
Show that that's a sheni.
That's itself. If he's telling you to put it in, obviously it's a sheni. If he's telling you to put the oil in it, it's not a kli rishon. 1 second, please. Hello. Baruch Hashem well. Very good. Can I call you back a little bit later? I'm just in the middle of something. Okay, I appreciate you calling. Thank you.
But he's saying to take the oil in a kli sheni or the water?
No. Take the water from the hot springs of Tveria, which is a kli rishon because it's actually the ground where it's itself is heated, and take the water in a kli sheni and then put the oil into that kli sheni.
Maybe. So then you should confuse it with the keli of the oil.
Exactly. The gzeira of bathing happened in stages, and originally they did not forbid chametz v'eria.
Because it's adama.
Right. It's not told. It's not ur. Not told as ur. It's like told as chama.
It's not ambati. Ambati is the kli rishon, and the other one is kli sheni. When you take it.
No, there's also kli rishon, but it's not regular hot water from fire. It's hot water from the earth. So, in the beginning, they didn't make the decree. I'm sorry?
Could you say that he said kli sheni because you've already got the oil in a keli, and so as not to confuse it by saying you should heat it directly?
You already got the what? Sorry?
You've got a keli already. The oil is already in its own keli. So you say take another keli and put for the water.
Sheni is not a reference to the oil.
It might not be, but you've already got one keli. You put it. You put the. You could say put the oil into a keli, but in English you'd say find another vessel and put the and put the oil into that one. So if I came to you and said, "Hey, I want to heat up the oil in this bottle," you'd say, "Take a bowl or take another vessel."
I don't believe that's the shot. I believe the Kli Sheni is in reference to the Kli Rishon, which is on the fire, or in this case, it's in the fire, but it's in the earth. Let me see if I can just rustle up the Gemara.
Would it be in the Mishnah Berurah somewhere?
The story is in the Gemara. I don't know if the Mishnah Berurah brings the story, but I think it's Mem Beis and Shabbos. Give me a second.
Here's what we say. What do they show them? Enough.
All right. I mean, in the context of the Gemara, it's clear that we're talking about the Kli Rishon is the Ambati. The Kli Sheni is the whatever vessel that he's transferring the water. It's in reference to the Ambati, not in reference to the oil. Simply because in the Gemara, it's talking about other cases of Kli Sheni. Kli Sheni in a mavashel, right? From Rebbe's story, we see that Kli Sheni doesn't cook, right? And obviously, Kli Sheni generally means in contrast to the Kli Rishon, which is on the fire. He's using the same expression of Kli Sheni. So the Gemara clearly understood it was a Kli Sheni and compared to the bath. With me? Elsie?
Yep.
Okay.
Inventing a new definition for Kli Sheni is confusing.
Why is it confusing?
Well, inventing a definition that says that it's something that comes after a ladle and is effectively what we would think of as a kli shlishi is confusing.
It doesn't have to come after a ladle. You can pour it directly in, like an urn. There's no ladle. You pour it directly from the urn into the cup. Kli sheni.
Oh, isn't he saying that we learn from the fact that he says kli sheni instead of kli that it's actually a third vessel? Isn't that what the Taz is saying?
That what, sorry?
I thought you were saying that the fact that we say kli sheni implies that there was another one involved, and therefore this is a third keli. Isn't that what I thought? That's what you were saying. The Taz says.
That's what the Taz is saying, but that doesn't mean it has to be that. He's saying that even if there is a ladle, you still can't do it in the ladle itself. You have to do it in the second keli. But there doesn't have to be a ladle. If you could pour directly from it, it would still be a kli sheni. He's saying even if it's a ladle. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I thought he was learning from this that a ladle does not feature in the in being a keli. So therefore, the Taz is learning that a kli sheni with a ladle is actually is not a kli shlishi like we would think.
That's correct. The Taz is saying that. The Taz is saying that. The Taz is saying that even a ladle is not going to create a kli shlishi. If you hold that a ladle is a kli rishon, then the next one is going to be a kli sheni.
I don't. Okay.
The fact that I've told you in the past that a soup bowl has the din of a kli shlishi is not because the Taz agrees with that. It's because basically, even though there's an argument about the ladle itself, but when it comes to the bowl that follows the ladle, we can be lenient because there it's either a kli sheni or a kli shlishi. So on that suffix will be lenient.
No, I understand.
But it is a suffix, meaning to say there are those that would hold it's a kli sheni. Okay. So just to clarify this issue a little bit further, the argument is made that if you don't leave the ladle in for long at all, if you simply in and out, the argument is made that maybe everybody would agree that the ladle does not have the status of a kli rishon, because the whole point of a ladle being a kli rishon is that it gets heated from the kli rishon, and therefore there's no concept of it cooling down the food. The point of a kli sheni is that it's supposed to have walls that cool down the food. If the walls get heated up on the fire, or in the kli rishon, which was on the fire, so how's it going to cool down the food? Okay, but that's if you left it in long enough to heat up. But if you dipped it in and out very quickly, so it didn't get the time to heat up, so then it for sure is a kli sheni. That argument is made. That's point number one.
Don't we definitely have to take it off the fire before we put the ladle in?
Actually, we're going to discuss that later, but we're going to see that if it is a clear liquid, you could put the ladle in even on the fire. Because the whole idea of not putting a ladle in on the fire is that you're mixing it in a way that might appear to be cooking. But if it's a clear liquid, so that kind of mixing is not like you don't even have to mix such a thing, you know what I'm saying? A cholent you need to mix, even a soup, if it has, different ingredients, carrots, whatever, maybe you want to mix it, face. But just a clear broth or water for that matter, so that you could use a ladle for on the fire. But I'm saying even off the fire, if you leave it in long enough to get heated from that kli rishon, that's when it might be a kli rishon. But if you just do it in and out, so the argument is made that is for sure not a kli rishon. Sorry.
So I could do that on Shabbos. I could, if I want to make a tea in the pot pot of water is boiling on the stove, I can just do a ladle in and out quickly, and that's my kli sheni. Pour it into a kli shlishi.
So it would seem, yes.
Okay.
So it would seem. Okay. Do I have anything else to say before we actually start learning? Let me check.
Did you see the eclipse yesterday? I don't know if you went up.
I didn't travel up, but I saw a bit of it in real life, and I saw the rest on the computer. So
Okay.
I was yoitza.
All right.
My kids were busy.
I went up to Wyoming, so I saw it at the whole thing. It was wonderful.
Nice. Where in Wyoming?
Glendo. It's about 100 miles north of Cheyenne.
Nice. Yeah, my kids ended up with the glasses, so I didn't see much of it in real life. But
to see the total eclipse, that was amazing. It was like unbelievable.
Nice. Well, there's another one in 2024, I believe, so maybe I'll be zocheh to that. Okay, so we are going to continue in the Mechaber. And it is Sif Yud Beis. Ready? Mecham shepina mimenu mayim chamin. A kettle that you emptied of hot water. Mutter l'soich litin l'soich mayim tzoinin merubin. The Rama adds, you're allowed to add a lot of cold water. Chidei lafshin, in order to warm them up. So you have this kettle. You emptied it out of the hot water. You have cold water that you want to warm up. As long as you put in a lot of the cold water so that the total temperature is only going to be warm and not hot, that's okay. That's halacha number 1 here of Yud Beis. Halacha number 2 is umutra litzoik mayim chamin l'soich mayim tzoyin l'tzoyin l'soich chamin u'shelo yu b'kli rishon neshim cham man harbe. You can pour hot water into cold, or cold water into hot, as long as the hot is not in the kli rishon, because in the kli rishon it's going to heat it up a lot. So cold into hot, that's not in the kli rishon. That's obvious. We discussed it many times. What about hot into cold? If you're pouring from a kli rishon, why is that allowed?
Just give me a
What's that?
We have a Dutcher mine.
Yeah.
We build another Dutcher mine.
Yeah.
So this is a cliche.
If you have a dud shamayim,
And you build another Dutcher mine. I mean, it's like 2 water here. So one is Kirishon and one Krishini. So you allow to do combina, like I just maybe a Kiddush.
So the problem is with the cooking, not with the cooling down. And if you put a small amount of hot into a large amount of cold, you're not cooking.
Second, you'll see. I'm trying to understand what.
Oh, sorry.
One more time. What? Sorry, what? Yep.
He's saying after the first dude shemesh gets its water, heat it up, it sends it to a second kli, which that turns into a kli.
And then what?
And then you're allowed to pour it in your cup.
Take a shower. So, I don't know. What people do on Shabbat.
You can take a shower in hot water even if it's a kli chamishi.
So why are they doing that? What's the reason?
Why are they doing what?
To have a hot water and the Dutch and Israel and all that. Okay.
They do it for the weekday, they'll do it for Shabbat. Something special.
You don't need a week for that. You can
Dutch
do
shemesh, why
it
not?
electric.
It's a waste of money.
No,
Dutch shemesh is not for Shabbos. Dutch shemesh is to save money.
you don't use it in Shabbat.
Maybe they do, maybe they
For
don't.
wash kelim and stuff like that.
Some say you can, but you don't need a klisheni. Those that are mekel, because they hold it's chama, and not told Not, sorry, not Toldos Chama. Have. They would be makel even in a Kli Rishon. I'm not sure what the.
What do you mean they hold its chama?
If you hold that the water in the Dur Shemesh is heated directly by the sun and not by Toldos Chama, so then causing more water to go in there is no problem because you're allowed to heat water directly from the sun.
Right. But what, I don't know how, I don't mean to get into this conversation, you can tell me to stop, but how does the water get hot if it's not through the metal or, meaning, the sun just doesn't warm up water. I mean, it'll warm it up, but not to a temperature like that.
It's the
It
glass.
must be
It's the
above
glass, yes.
Yeah, and the glass concentrates it.
And the bottom.
And is that considered, the glass is considered?
So that's the question. The glass is just concentrating the heat of the sun. So maybe it's still the sun. I think Ravadya is makel on that. Pretty sure.
You can use it for washing candle,
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
even though it's gonna, oh, because it's chama. Even if it filled up again.
Because it's Chama, not Toldos Chama. Yossi, go ahead, sorry.
I was just answering your question. You were asking why you could put hot into cold.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
The issue is with cooking something, and if you're putting hot into cold, then you're cooling it down. Is that, or are you asking why you could do it so that it would get to more than 45 degrees?
Well, yeah, well, that would be the question. What if you put in enough that that the total temperature is gonna be above Yatzalet Boy? You pour a lot of hot water into a small amount of cold water. Allowed or not allowed?
I wouldn't have thought so, because heating up water, you said, is particularly problematic, more so than cooking regular stuff.
Did I say more so?
You were saying that that hot water is particularly chashuv, or either because it's used for washing dishes or because the difference between cold and hot is massive.
Not water per se, but liquids in general have the chumrah that if they cool down, you reheat them, you can be chayav again.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what you mean.
Yeah. But are you saying that you can do that? You can heat water up to over 45 degrees?
Well, that's what I was asking. Who remembers from yesterday, my friends? Are you allowed? Finishing, by the way. I've been instructed not to bring any of it home. So if anybody wants, Bakasha. It's careful, it's a little bit, some of the matbucha got on the bottom there, careful. Sorry.
If you were allowed to, I suppose the only reason would be it's an iri from a Kli Rishon which doesn't cook.
Ah, is that a fact? Iri from a Kli Rishon doesn't cook?
I thought that for Shabbos purposes we say it does, and that's why we use a Kli Sheni.
But what's going on? The question is, I just read the Mechaber, who says, I'll read it again. You're allowed to pour hot water into cold water. Or cold into hot as long as it's not in Kli Rishon. But in the first case, it seems like you're allowed to pour hot into cold, even though the hot is coming from a Kli Rishon. What about Iri and Kli Rishon, Mashal Kadei Klipa? What's going on?
What's the difference between using?
We studied
It was the, I forgot what.
but the water, because
Yeah.
the water mixed together, we studied yesterday.
That's the Ran. The Ran says exactly. The Ran says that the idea of cooking a klipa is only if it's hitting a surface. But if it's mixing it right away, there's no surface for it to heat up. Daniel, go ahead. Sorry.
So what's the difference between using Eror and Litzok for the pouring? What's the difference? Is there a difference between the words?
Oh, Iri means pouring in Hebrew.
And Litzok means to pour also?
Yeah, not sure of the difference, but yeah, it means the same.
Okay, I was just
Maybe
confused. Thanks.
Difference, I don't know, but yeah, more or less the same.
I'm a bit confused about this because I understand that when you've got a skin on, you've got a piece of meat, you pour boiling water onto that, and you can see it change. You can see it cook in front of you. So I understand that there is a problem with that. But if you pour it into water, what we're saying is that it gets absorbed and it doesn't cook. But if we're defining cooking as water as getting above 45 degrees, and clearly it does get above 45 degrees, the fact of the matter is, from a Kli Rishon, we have heated up water to more than 45 degrees. So surely, by definition, it's the malacha.
No. Yossi asked a good question. What about the reason let us go according to Shalom Zalman? Celsius, by the way. England.
What was the question again?
The question Yossi is asking is, the Ran has a very nice Talmudic answer as to why you're allowed to pour hot into cold, even if the total temperature is going to be hot. Because the Irui, the pour from Kli Rishon, only heats the peel of the bottom one if it's a solid surface that it hits on. But if it mixes in, it doesn't really heat it because it has no surface. That's all a nice Talmudic discussion. But if you measure the temperature of the total effect of what you did, and you're left with water that's Yad Saletas Ba'i, and the definition of cooking when it comes to water is Yad Saletas Ba'i, so you've cooked the water. Klipa, not klipa, mixing, not mixing, you've cooked the water. So what's the pshat?
The pshat is not meat, it's water. And the water, it doesn't, when you mix it, it's basically it's a different halacha.
Why?
Because it's a water, it's not piece of,
So what? Water has cooking also. Okay, so the only answer that I've seen to this question, which is not such an easy answer to explain in scientific language, it's just an answer that would make sense in a yeshiva, that even though the total temperature of the water is Yad Saletas Ba'i, but the cold water is actually not Yad Saletas Ba'i. It's just mixed. It's mixed with the hot water. It's not actually heated up. So you're measuring the total temperature. The total temperature is because there's so much hot water in there. Cold water has mixed with it, so you can't notice it. But it actually is not really hot.
Okay. Whose answer was this? A professor of fluid dynamics and thermodynamics, no doubt.
If I'm not mistaken, I didn't see it this time around, but if I'm not mistaken, last time I was learning this, I saw it in the Chedushei Maharam Kozis. There was a Rishon whose name was Maharam Kozis, who didn't have a copy of the Gemara. Imagine that. We have, even a simple person like me, has like 60, 75,000 svarim at their fingertips, literally. And the Maharam Kozis lived at a time when they had burnt the Gemaras. He didn't have a Gemara.
everything is in the.
No. He had the Rishonim. He had the Rambam, he had the Rif, yeah.
No way.
I'm pretty sure.
How do you learn like
That's what I read.
that? No?
He didn't have the Gemara, yet he learned to the extent that he wrote Chedushim Maharam Kozis. He's quoted. If I'm not mistaken, the Maharam Kozis says this word, that if the total temperature is Yad Saletas Ba'i, but it's halachically not cooking because whatever it is that we've explained around and whatever it is, So the fact that it is Yatzaledus Bay doesn't mean that the cold water is Yatzaledus Bay. It means the hot water is Yatzaledus Bay. There's so much of it that when you feel it, it feels Yatzaledus Bay. But the cold water is just mixed in there. It's not really hot.
Meaning it's still cold.
It's still cold. It's just like bottles, so you don't notice it. Hard to explain physically.
Why isn't it lowering the total temperature?
Because there's not enough of it to lower it.
Meaning it's like particles. It's like atoms.
Exactly.
So it's right. It's like really, this is still a cold.
No, it's mixed. No, cold. There's some cold and hot, and some hot. Mostly hot, some cold.
Are we halachically required to believe this? Serious question, by the way.
No, because Tosfos argues on the Ran. This is if you pass like the Ran, you have to believe it. But if you pass like Tosfos, you don't have to believe it. Because Tosfos, I was saying this yesterday, Tosfos says that you can only add water from a Kli Rishon to a Kli Sheni if the total temperature is not going to be Yatzaledus Bay. Because he says when you usually add from something that has less to something that has more. That's usually the way it is. If you're mixing two things, you usually pour the smaller amount and the bigger amount, rather than vice versa, because it's easier. So when it says in the Gemara, you're allowed to pour, it's talking about pouring less than what you have in the original cup. You understand? So it's the total temperature is going to end up being less than Yatzaledus Bay. But if it would be Yatzaledus Bay, then it would be Bishul, exactly. So if you don't like the Tosfos' answer, you could just accept Tosfos as the halacha.
So according to him, according to the Ran, can you pour a small amount of cold water into a large amount of hot water?
And the hot water is in a Kli Rishon or a Kli Sheni?
Into a Kli Sheni.
Yes.
But according to Tosfos, can you?
Yeah, because a Kli Sheni doesn't cook.
Okay.
Kli Sheni doesn't cook. You'll say, well, a Kli Sheni also is Yatzaledus, and the total temperature is going to be Yatzaledus. But in Tosfos' view, that's like, because Yatzaledus is cooling down, so it's not a permanent kind of heat. It's like dissipating heat. Quoting one of your countrymen, Rabbi Nosson Slifkin, the zoo rabbi. The zoo rabbi. Never heard of him?
Why is he called the zoo rabbi?
Because he does a lot of research on animals and he's a zoologist. Anyway, so he got into a lot of trouble because of questions like this, like, do you have to believe? And different things Chazal said, if it's contradicted by science and whatever. Got into some trouble. But one of his articles is about it's about the this creature, according to Chazal, which had it's like a gorilla that was attached to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm talking about?
No, never heard of it.
It's called Adnei Hasoda. It's the masters of the field. It's like a humanoid type of animal. It's attached to the ground. It's very strong, and the only way to kill it is to break that pipe that attaches it to the ground. It's like a.
Where's that found?
I think it's a medrash. It's a medrash, and Rashi brings it down actually in the Chumash and Parshas Va'era by the Makkah of Orav, by the Makkah of Orav, by the wild beasts. Anyway, so he says basically in the article that, there's absolutely no scientific basis for any such creature. So because there's so many different pshatim in that pasuk, why do we have to accept that pshat? We'll accept the other pshatim, the other rishonim. We'll say a different pshat, and that way we don't have to, bend ourselves over backwards and say that science is wrong. We could just say science is right, and the other rishonim are right also. Anyway, I'm
Why
not.
did you say that?
I'm sorry?
Why can't you say the Rishon? That says it's a gorilla attached to the ground?
Mhm.
Why can't you say he's right? Science argues on it.
Okay, that's one perspective. But it's not the Zurabba's perspective.
You can't say Rishon and we're wrong. I'm saying
Well, his point is that there are other Rishonim, so why can't they be right?
they are right. They're also right.
Okay. But the pasuk only means one. I mean, it's what is it? Is it one or is it the other?
Another long conversation. Different perspective. Are they all right or are they all wrong? I mean, or only one of those are.
Right. Exactly. Anyway, I'm not saying he's right. I'm not saying he's right. But Pashtos, if Chazal said it, it has to be true at least on some level.
Chazal or Rishon?
I think it's a Medrash, actually. I think it's a Medrash.
I saw that. I'm not sure about Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef once. He was quoting a posik, but he didn't want to say his name.
Yep.
It was in Bnei Brak because he didn't want to talk to Shulchan. Because this funny guy,
Yeah.
he says that he wanted to bring a source that the Rambam says that there isn't a ship that has that flies in the air. And because the Rambam was wrong, nowadays we have airplanes. There's ships that flies in the air. It's a raya that Rishonim are wrong. Right.
My gosh.
So he said that he obviously can't say that because in his time it wasn't Mitzvah. Why can't we say that that was the situation there? And then there, and now we didn't even have that. It was extinct.
I'm totally not getting into that discussion. I just, yes, he asked me that question, so I quoted that guy and whatever.
No, what I'm saying is that even according to that guy, why can't he say that Rishon? Let's say he had. Okay, fine.
This is theological discussions for another time.
It's like the holidays. It's 2 days. Why we don't do 1 day? Because this is the halakha, 2 days. Right, Ahmed?
Yeah, everything all at once in one night. Let's go. Okay. If you pour, listen carefully, important chiddush the Rama is saying, if you pour a lot of cold water into a hot kli rishon, that's also okay. We mentioned this before. As long as the total temperature is going to be less than Yatz Letters Bay when you're done.
Except for the
Ambati, where the some Rishonim say that it's Aser. Maybe it doesn't sound out to those Rishonim, because in Ambati, he said it was talking about a cliche.
So according to the Mechaber, that he's talking about a whole different scenario of an Ambati. According to the Mechaber, it's a fire underneath. That's what's making it. According to the
Well, you can't say it's a fire underneath. If there's the actual fire, you can't add anything to something on the fire. But it used to be on the fire.
It was warmed up for Shabbos. I think I asked you this once. Did you ever give? I don't know if you gave me an answer. The Mechaber saw the Ramaz notes on his saver.
I don't know.
Oh, I don't remember an answer.
I don't know if he did.
I'm saying he's having shocked. Maybe he's not. Maybe he understood that is. Maybe he's trying to say that is.
Well, when it's clear that he argues, then he says yesh amrim. But if what his opinion is not a clear contradiction, then he'll work it into the words of the Rama of the Mechaber. See what I'm saying? If it's a clear disagreement, he'll say yesh amrim. But if because the Mechaber doesn't say clearly he's talking about a clear rishon. So he says, I think it's talking about a cliche. Okay? That's the Ramah style. Okay. The Magen Avraham brings in a question that the Gemara addresses. And that is, why are you allowed to add cold water to a hot kettle? You just emptied it of water, and it's hot, and you added cold water to it. The way that they strengthen metal is to heat it up and then plunge it into cold water. And that strengthens the metal.
Tempering,
thank you very much. So here you have this kettle. In theory, you just took it off the fire. It was boiling on the fire. You emptied it out. And now you're pouring a lot of cold water on it all at once, so the total temperature is going to be less at the outside limit by, why is that not going to strengthen the metal?
Because that was probably already done.
Yeah, but you could do it. You could continue strengthening the metal.
Really?
Yeah.
Once it's done, you're not improving it.
Who said?
Well, you have to get it really, really hot, and once you've tempered metal, you don't need to temper it again, and unless you get it really hot.
But you could.
I would think that the more you do that, it'll become more brittle. I think that's what happens with metal.
Usually, yeah, but I mean, it's the speed at which it cools down. So if it's called quenching. You take the metal red hot and then you quench it various times into various things, but it's the speed of the last one that usually does it. I imagine that it would be quite negligible. Certainly nowadays on the pots we've got.
Actually, what you're saying is not far from what the Gemara says. That is, when you have the Gemara differentiates whether you took it off the fire and it was empty when it was on the fire, or you took it off the fire and then you emptied the water from it. Mecham shepinahu or mecham shepina mimenu mayim, two ways of the Girsa and the Mishnah. Is it that you took the mecham, you took the kettle off the fire? If you had a kettle on the fire without any water in it, that kettle could get very hot. And then when you pour water on it, you're really changing the temperature very radically. And therefore that could temper it. But mecham shepina mimenu mayim, if it had water in it, the temperature of that metal could never reach more than 212 Fahrenheit or 100 Celsius, right? Because the heat is transferring through the metal into the water, which is boiling out. So it's never reaching more than 212. So therefore, it's not really going to temper it much. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but it's definitely not a psikration. It's definitely not for sure going to temper it because of that slight, change. It's not such a big change to for sure temper it. Okay. Moving right along to Yud Gimel. Mutter liten kitchel mayim oishal shar mashkim b'chli sheni sheish ben mayim chamen al b'chli rishon aser. You're allowed to put a flask of water or other mashkim into a kli sheni that has hot water in it, but you cannot do that in a kli rishon. This is exactly the case of Rav Yitzchak Bar Dimi and Rebbe. You can take a flask of oil and put it into a kli sheni, and it's going to be heated by the liquid in the kli sheni. It's no problem. The truth is, you could pour it directly in too, but whatever. He's saying that you can do in a kli sheni, but not in a kli rishon. Maybe that's the chiddush. I think the Mishnah Berurah says that's the chiddush. The fact that you could put it in a flask in a kli sheni is not a chiddush because you could even pour it in directly. So for sure, with a flask where there's a hefsek, right, where there's the interruption of the walls of the flask. Chiddush is that even that is only allowed in a kli sheni, but a kli rishon you cannot put a flask to heat it up because it's going to heat it up through the flask walls. It's going to heat up the liquid.
Is this a kind of hot mana?
He addresses this hatmana issue, and he says that it's not hatmana because a kli sheni is going down in heat. So it's not called moisef hevel. It's not called moisef hevel. It doesn't add heat because the kli sheni is off the fire, so it's going down in heat. You with me?
Yes.
That's the point. Kli rishon you can't do it anyway because it's going to be bishul. Kli sheni, it's not bishul, and it's not atmana either because it's not moisef hevel, doesn't add heat. And even though the truth is you can't be matman in a way that maintains heat either on Shabbos, but here it's a cold thing. You're not maintaining the heat. It's a cold thing. Right? You're allowed to put a cold thing in something that doesn't add heat. So therefore it's allowed. All right. All right, we're going to stop for a few minutes. All right, Yossi and Daniel, I'm sorry, we have to...
Okay, thank you very much.
We have to break just for mine. We'll continue after mine in 10 minutes.
Okay.
All right, sorry.
Oh, okay, so I'll just stand by.
Okay, very good.
תהינים, לא ידעתי, עכשיו
זה כבר חשוב לך, פעם הבאה יהיה תהינים. לא, זה חזק. מנקה את כל הקנים.
יאללה, לחיים, לחיים.
בריאות אושר באושר.
אמן, אמן.
פרנסה טובה ויושר.
אמן. רק בשמחות. עוד סיבוב או שמשקיע? בוא נעשה מספרים שלנו, מספרים. כל אחד ייקח ספרים.
אבל אנחנו היום.
חושב שהקדוש ברוך הוא מסתכל.
עלינו לשבוע. הקטע האמור לך שונה, והקדיש שונה.
יש למישהו חיוב?
בקדיש של החב"ד אין שזה פאק. אף אחד לא שזוף. אין שזופים.
יש למישהו חיוב שמה?
בבקשה.
ויום אנחנו מכפר עוון ולא ישרות את השם.
מה היה עושה ערבית?
ערבית.
ראש חודש.
תוקע בשופר, לא תוקע.
שמונת צדיקים מאדוני מאוזן ויצרה ויעזרים אדוני פרטים פרטים ורשעים ולא שיגיעו חסו בו ואדוני צבות יתמנן שלנו והקוף סלע אדוני צבות השנה בתי הבא אדוני הושיע המלך יעננו ביום כהן המקדש השני הבא וכי דחותי בית מחותי כן יכול להצמח בו כנראה לקרב משכב נכון היית יכול לצרף על האוזן תחילים לא אמן
יש לי
قالوا تصور من العالمين بركة أدوناي وهو إسرائيل אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
אמן.
עכשיו נעשה לכנו שיהיה לשמחה רבה עבור כולם.
מי כמוך בעת אדוני.
שכרו בניך עובדי הים. הם אשר זעירינו ואמרו.
אדוני ימלוך לנו בעת.
קיבלנו את זה, הוא לא מעט חזק ממנו.
אדוני גאל ישראל.
כן, שומר מצאנו אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני. גם מקדש, אמרתי לך יותר, מה חותמת, ויעצמך לא כאן להתערב בקדש, כל הזמן נכון, וכאן יכול לצלח הגרול זמן, קריבנו אמן. יש לך אמור אחוז, משתבח מתפאר ונאמר מתנשא את אדם וקראת על השמל, וקשת ורחום, להאמין לו בחטא שירדת, שתחתה ונחלת האמירה, ולמה, וקריבנו אמן. דוד קדש, עניין הבא, אמרתי גרפיה לחמותי, הצלחנו כאן לקרב משלם, היפון, ואנחנו בצד בגלב זמן קריב, יש לך בפעם לתרומה להתנסה לתת לבצע לדבר שמתשעות לכו, כל בחטא בשירות השפחתה ונכם נתת ימין המלאדמה, נתנו אמן, לקבל סודון, ותרון בכל בית ישראל קדם מובן בלשמיה וקורא אמן, שתרבה לך משמיה על כל ישראל וקורא אמן, זה שלום עלינו, זה שלום עלינו על כל ישראל וקורא אמן, עלינו לשבח. כי המלכות שלך יהיו לו מעטים וחברות וטוב לך, ראינו כל עובד, ונאמן, והאלה מהכל הארץ, תהיה מורחים. זה עכשיו, דיברת את התשובה השאלה שהיינו. שמע ישראל.
Rabbi, are we done? We still have about 8 minutes. Are we done?
No, we're not done. All right. Thank you. Shakor.
תודה רבה רבה.
בשמחה וכיף. תודה.
תודה רבה לכם.
כל טוב.
פעם הבאה תזמינו אותנו גם לארץ, מה הבעיה? תבוא שני ושלישי, אנחנו פה תקציב.
אני עם הרב שרמה, אתם תבואו אלינו.
אתם גם לא יכולים לעזוב אותו. לא,
Yudalit. Yudalit. Moving right along. Mutter litin kitin shalmayim. Oy shosha mashtim keneged ha'esh. Lahafik tzinosan. You're allowed to put water or other liquids opposite a fire to remove their coldness. You're not allowed to heat them up, but you can put them there just to take off the edge of the coldness.
What happens if they accidentally get too hot?
We're going to learn about that right now. You have to put it far enough away from the fire so that in that place it would never, ever become yatzer lettuce. Not sure. I mean, the answer is very simple. Put your hand there, and if your hand is yet not yatzer lettuce, your hand is not soiled, then it's not going to become yatzer lettuce.
The reason we don't put it close, Shema Shachach, וישאיר את זה יותר מודע. אבל היום יש מכונות, שאתה תעשה לו את המכונה ככה, והוא יזוז לבד. אתה לא שוכח.
מה?
אפשרי? יש מכונה שאתה עושה לה פרוגרם, לפני שבת, שהוא זז.
בשביל זה אתה עושה מכונה?
אני יודע, אני חושב, אתה יודע, רחוק.
I'm sure there's better things you can do with such machines, but yeah, if it's not going to heat up, it's not going to heat up. The translation of Yad Tzaledes Boy is actually not a hand, it's the belly of a baby, which is more sensitive than the hand of an adult, obviously. I will also look at relation.
How would you ever judge over your hand?
If I'm not mistaken, if I understand the pshat correctly, Yad Tzaledes Boy is the same as Kreisei Shaltinek Nichvis Boy. If your hand can't stay there comfortably, that's hot enough to burn a baby's stomach. So it's really the same. I will also you're not allowed to put it close to the fire in such a way that it could reach Yad Tzaledes. Even if you only leave it there for a short time, just to take the edge off the coldness, it's forbidden. Because it could cook there if you would forget it there. Same thing applies to fruit or anything else that's edible raw. Look previously. In other words, water or anything else edible raw, how much more so if it's not edible raw. But even edible raw, where you might think you're not really changing it so much, no, halachically that's cooking if you cook it. And if you would leave it there and it would reach that temperature, that's the beginning of cooking. So even if you're planning to remove it before it reaches there, you cannot do it.
How many seconds?
What do you mean?
If it gets to the temperature, meaning sometimes there's things that it's not really like putting my hand near the fireplace. Like I could probably put it there for like 30, 40 seconds. But after 30, 40 seconds, it's just getting really hot.
So what's your question?
That's considered Yad Tzaledes one?
I mean, nowadays the person gave us temperatures. We could just go with the temperatures.
Same distance. Distance from the fireplace. As long as it's going to get to Yad Tzaledes one.
If you would leave it there.
Maybe my hand is different than like liquid.
Yeah, but the point is that the liquid is judged by the same thing, which is your hand. So if your hand is not getting Yad Tzaledes Boy, then the liquid is not going to get that either. You know what I'm saying? It's the same temperature. Okay, so the Magen Avram brings in the question of leaving something there that could get burned. For example, you have a metal, some kind of metal pot, empty. He says you can leave it there. Why? Even though if it gets too hot, it could melt. Not let it melt metal on Shabbos. But that's not a tikkun. That's a kilkul. So that's not a deraisa anyway. And you're not planning to leave it there. And the Mishnah Berurah adds that certainly you're not going to want it to burn, so you're for sure going to take it away. Same thing with a towel. A towel, if you leave it there too long, it's going to physically burn. Also, it's allowed, because if it burns, obviously that's not your intention. And also, like we said, you're going to make sure to take it away before it burns. All right. One more halacha, Tezvav. Davar is bashal. Called tzorkei v'hu yavish. Something that cooked totally and it's dry. You're allowed to put it opposite in Medura, even in a place that's Yad Tzaledes Boy. Now, the point
is this putting schnitzels on a blech?
This is, if you want to know what this actually is, this is actually putting something near a fireplace. That's what actually this is. But you're saying maybe it's the same to put a shnisel on a blech. Could be it's the same. The point is, you cannot put it in a place that's normal to cook. That's why you cannot. He doesn't say to put it in an oven or on an oven. Understand? He says to put it opposite a fireplace. That's for sure not a normal place to cook. And like we said, some places can say the same thing applies to a blech. So according to those places, yes.
זה אותו הלכה לקחת משהו מהמקרר רבש ולשים אותו על הפלח.
לפי השיטות, כן.
What does Chabad hold? Is blech?
No, not to do it on a blech.
It's considered a way of cooking?
Yeah. Alter Rebbe holds that
Even plata?
plata, the Alter Rebbe doesn't discuss. Obviously, he didn't have platas in his days. But the blech, he says, he doesn't say it clearly, but it's understood that it's only a pot that is full or upside down that creates a hefsek. But a empty pot or something that's not, you understand, that's not the space creates the hefsek. Just the metal may be considered that it's bottle to the stove. So
Is there a difference between, or does another posting like Chabad discuss a plata over or because this is fire and this is.
Rav Farkash in this Sefer Shabbos Kalacha, he is noted to be lenient on a plata. So, but Yerushalayim.
Oh, that's the Rosh Chodesh of the.
He's not the Rosh Kollel in Tzemach Tzedek. He's one of the early Talmidim of that Rosh Kollel.
Oh. Still Rosh Chodesh?
Yeah, I was just there in the summer.
He's one of the.
Yeah, Rav Deitch, Chaim Shalom Deitch.
He's one of the big guns.
Top, one of the top in halacha. I mean, he's top in many ways. In halacha, especially Ar Chaim, especially the Alter Shulchan Aruch Rav, one of the big experts. And if you ever come with me to Hadich for Chavdala Tevis, he's one of the big guys there. Anyway.
Are you going again next year?
I usually go when my kids get bar mitzvah, so I take them for a little post bar mitzvah trip. So the next one is in a few years. So hopefully he'll earn it, and yeah. Anyway, the point is that Haggadah, the Ramah says, this is the Ramah's opinion, which we mentioned many times, but this is where the Ramah himself mentions it for the first time in the Siman, that even if the liquid cooled down a little bit, if it is hot, even if it has liquid, it's okay. It just means hot. It doesn't mean boiling.
I mean, it means boiling. Maybe it doesn't.
No, in this context, it doesn't mean boiling. It means hot.
Sorry, I don't understand.
My proof is that we're not even talking about no, we are talking about Rosh Hashanah Mark. Sorry. I'm sorry, what do you say?
Sorry, we're saying that if it's in liquid, it's okay?
No, if it's in liquid, it has to still be hot. We're talking about reheating something opposite of fire. So if it's fully cooked and dry, that's okay. But if it has liquid, then it has to still be hot.
What do you mean still be hot? You mean it has to have residual heat from before?
As far as residual heat, we're going to see right now.
No, I don't understand what it means by it has to be hot.
Sorry?
I don't understand what it means by it has to still be hot.
The simple halacha is that it has to be yad seledes boy, which is a definition of hot for the purpose of cooking on Shabbos.
So if it's got liquid, I can put it there if it's already hot.
Yeah.
What's the chiddush?
You wouldn't be allowed to put it on top of a stove.
If it's already
chazorah. Because that's the place for normal cooking. Opposite a fireplace is not a normal place for cooking. So you could do it as long as there's no actual cooking. Why is there no actual cooking? Either because it's fully cooked and dry, or because it's still hot if it has liquid.
So I could do chazara if I've had a soup pot, a soup tureen on the table, or a soup pot on the table, I could put it back after it's been on the table for 20 minutes if it's 60 degrees, on top of an upturned pot on a blech.
Yeah. However you define not a normal way of cooking, you don't need the conditions of chazar. You just have to make sure there's no actual bishul.
Okay.
Some says, oh, you don't put it on the fire, but rather, or on the kir, but rather next to it. It's okay, even if it's totally cold, even if it's liquid. Again, this opinion that there is no cooking with liquids also. It's already cooked. The minhag is to be lenient if it's still somewhat hot. As long as it's not a sanlagami, it's not totally cooled down, which the later person can say it means that it's good enough to serve your guests.
Sounds like he's saying less than that.
So lukewarm, basically, tepid.
That is it, but it sounds like even a little less than that. Like, so you guys might be like a.
Well, the point is it has to be warm. It has to be warm. It can't be 1 degree over room temperature. What's the getter of lenesan al-gamri? So the place can explain that it has to be. I don't know if they use the word guests. They use the word nechal mach maschamimusa. You would still consider it a hot dish. So it's more balabatish. It's not a halachic technical thing of temperatures, but it's still, you would consider it a hot dish.
It's sounded as cold or room temperature.
Just like where seach means yatzalet boy in this context, soinen means cold. Yeah.
No, because if it is room temperature, I'm sorry, if that is cold, then room temperature would be okay.
Yeah, no, it doesn't mean that. Doesn't mean that.
So,
No, that's the simple pshat.
so
Less than room temperature, how would you do that? You have refrigeration.
No, room temperature.
Lo nisan al-gamri means it's not nisan al-gamri. We're not talking about getting it to less than room temperature.
Right. Well, I guess if you're just, unless you're, meaning the coldest something is going to get by itself is just room temperature. How cold it is outside, that's going to get even colder. It's not going to. Nothing turns cold. Things turn room temperature. Cold makes it colder.
so if it's a warm, it's like a warm food, it's hot dish, right? Warm?
Halachically hot is yatzalet boy, usually. Here the Rambam says a chiddush that when it comes to liquids that were once cooked and are now still warm, even if it's not yatzalet boy, it's still considered cooked for the purpose of Shabbos.
Does this apply to water?
Yes, certainly.
So water that's 35 degrees, I could pop back onto a blech on an upturned pot.
Correct. And if people consider that like warm, it's enough, to tea people would drink at that temperature as a warm tea. You know what I'm saying? Then yes. There's no specific temperature for it because obviously every food is different. But as long as that food would be considered, edible as a hot food at that temperature, yes. All right, my friends, we still have to do the Alter Rebbe, and then we are nearing the end of the Siman, actually. The end of the Siman is in sight. All right, have a good evening, all.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
When will we get our Tishrei calendar for learning?